Hiya, it's Xavier, Expressions of Grace Bonsai, and I'm down at the bottom of the garden. Now if you watch my last video about what are the best 5 bonsai for beginners, you'll know that I said larch, and I also recommended getting onto the internet and ordering some. And you know what, it's a week later, and guess what's arrived? I've got 10 2-year-old larch saplings. Now you all know that when I first did this back in 2001, I ended up with several pretty good trees. Now I'm not saying to you, you've got to wait 20 years, but if you follow me through the rest of this video, I'm going to show you, 1, what to do with this now, just before Christmas, and 2, what you can expect in the future. So, why don't you come along with me? Okay, so got my delivery of 10 2 or 3 year sapling larches. Quite daunting. It's only 3 foot tall, and you're thinking, how on earth is this ever going to be bonsai? Well, let's have a look and see what we've got first of all. And I'm not going to make this an unwrapping or an unboxing video, so when you next come back, these will be unwrapped and we'll have a look at them. Okay, so we've got the wrappings off, and we've got this great monstrosity of what they call bare-rooted Japanese larch. These get grown in growing fields or whatever, and you'll look at them and you've got roots in all sorts of weird ways and everything, and you think, what on earth am I going to do with that? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I don't know either. Now, what you've got to do, you've got to clean them up, you've got to have a look, probably end up, normally with all these I'll cut them by 2/3, work through them individually. You look through the roots, and what you're trying to do is establish a new root base, and then you put it into nice free draining soil. It needs to be nice and friable, because what you're trying to do is have a growing medium that's going to facilitate easy new root growth in these things. And they're still going to grow some roots now, even though we're in December. The key thing here to say is, so long as the soil isn't frozen, which it isn't because you've made it yourself, and you keep the repots, which is what they're going to become, in a nice shady area. I mean, I'll actually keep mine in the glass house, greenhouse, but I have also just kept them down the bottom of the garden with all the rest of the stuff. They should be fine. These are, for all intents and purposes, dormant. So you ask yourself, is it safe to do work now? Well, clearly it is, because I wouldn't be doing otherwise. Yeah, all the energy now has been drawn back in from the green growth, although there's some green here, and is concentrating on the vascular. And the reason why we can do digging up of trees in late winter is because all that energy is stored basically in the trunk, in the branches, some in the roots, which means you can actually remove a lot of the roots, and the energy the tree needs next spring is still here in the vascular growth. That's why I emphasize by doing that. Not sure if that makes a difference. Anyway, so we can be quite brutal. We can, with all these things, have a look here. We've got a great big tap root here, which is we can remove, and that'll still leave this root here, and we can trim these roots down. No different than you might do in a spring repot. Basically treat it the same way. So that's what we do, and all we make sure we do is we've got some nice friable soil to put them in, and then we want some grow containers, and depending on the size of the tree, I'll often have something like that with some holes in it, or I might have cut down a plant pot. And again, what I'm looking for is something that's going to allow me to spread roots in a radial way, so I can start to form that nabari. And they'll probably stay in something like this. If I put one in each, and that's how I would do it, they'll stay in those for years. And the aim is to grow the roots, because right now all I want to do is grow roots. I won't do any work on anything like this for a good couple of years. So I'll pick what I'm going to use. I may use my in tray, because this day and age I don't work that much. I tend not to have an awful lot in my in tray. And I've got a level of soil, and I'll spread those roots out, and again, you can plant them that way. Now they won't be this high, but we'll chop those as we would in a spring repot. So I will pick whichever container I want. There is another option. You can plant it over a hard surface like this, and if I was going to put it straight to my nursery beds, what I would do is I would have that. I'd bury that about, I don't know, a foot into the soil, and then I would make sure I planted this on top of it, and then I'd have the soil going back on top, so the roots are being encouraged to go sideways, not downways. Basic principles when you're looking at getting your nabari and looking at getting that root spread you want. So let's get to it then, shall we? And let's see if we can create the trees that we're going to love in 2, 4, 6, 10 or even 20 years, as you can see from this one up here. I think the key thing you have to remember is that at this point you're deciding how long and what you want to do. I've got 10 of these. 3 or 4 of them I may actually put out into my nursery beds and leave them for 5, 6 years, and those ones I will definitely put something like that underneath it so that I can encourage the lateral growth of roots, and you say leave it most definitely 2-3 years, and do any pruning I do in the ground, as you've seen on Tony's bonsai. I think he's going to be doing a whole lot of that over the next season or two. Or you can pick a deeper container like this, and you would minimum keep it going in there for 2 years before you start looking at what you might do with it. And you've seen from my previous larch videos that the same batch of 20 saplings that I got in 2002 have developed at different rates dependent on where I put them and what I did with them. So it's entirely up to you, but for now we want to see and sort out this root structure, don't we? And probably remove majority of this. So let's get to it, shall we? There is another source of getting, these aren't dry rooted, they're hawthorns. I picked them up at a clearance about a month and a half ago, and in here there's 5 hawthorns. Now they're actually still in soil, but what I'm going to do today, take them out of the soil. I've got another 5 which I'll do in the spring to see what difference we get over time. With these, again, I will actually bare root these. Okay, so you've now seen I've got 5 bare rooted hawthorns, which are no different than what they look like. So I'm going to treat these the same way. So none of that compost is actually going to go to waste. It's in my bucket, and that may end up getting used, because at this young stage, although we like to have a really good strong sort of inorganic mix, younger time, all I want is something that will allow the roots to grow freely, but really I still want it to have some organics in there. I want it to have the ability to retain water, stuff like that. Now we need to go through the process of systematically working out what we're going to do. First thing is we want to have a look at where some branches are. Now you can wire these up now already and put lots of bends and curves, but the first thing you say to yourself is I have a very, 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 very straight with no taper. And what do we all want when we have bonsai? We all want taper. So we don't know what here is broken and what's not, so we have to give ourselves a little bit. I would look at this and I would go looking up this line. The minimum good growth I know I've got starts here, but I don't yet know if these, hopefully lower down we've got some good stuff, but I've definitely got a nice healthy branch there and a nice healthy branch there. So for now I'm going to cut the top half off, and that's going to go into next year's drying pile for the bonfire night. Okay, so we've got it down to that, and that certainly isn't going to be the final height, but there's enough growth on there that we'll get something from that. When it's potted up, I can actually, if I want to, wire, but chances are I'm not going to. So then we have a look at what we've actually got here. We've got this great big horrible root here. Now it can actually bend, but we've also got roots coming off of it, so it's identifying, keeping sufficient roots that you want, but removing the ones that clearly are going to be an issue. So get rid of that great big thing there. Now what we've got is something that we can spread out a bit, but if you have a look, the base is still quite high. We're potentially going to be losing that one there. We may even lose more of that in there at the next potting, but right now all I want is to have enough roots to maintain it. So the upper one here, very unlikely, so I won't want that one. There's a crossing one there that comes out of this here, that I don't want. And the thing about this is when you do each of these, by the way, I think I spent £24 to get the 10 here, which to be fair has gone up in price. You have to be real and say that I've got 10 because, you know, it'd be great if 10 survive next year, but there is the possibility that because of the amount of root removal I do, that I won't have 10 survive. So, you know, have a look where your root junctions are and think about where you want them to come from. So here, big bend there. I'm definitely going to be cutting off the majority of that. That can go flat. We've got this here. Here, we've got some nice junctions up here and here. And again, what will happen is I'll work my way through all these and decide what I want to keep. Got this one here, and it's no different than when you're doing your spring repots and you start looking at your roots and laying them out, but that's sufficiently down enough now that I can do something with it. So I'm going to just go through each one and do exactly that, and I may well, as I'm going along, identify different styles or characteristics of the tree, and that will be quite happy. It's dry root, so I'm going to work my way through them. So the other thing you want to be looking out for on this one, incredible right angle, you can start thinking about, actually I may use the roots like that and try and do, I wouldn't do it with the larch necessarily, but you could look at actually having it down as a semi-cascade just because of the way the roots are. But you can also look higher up and go, hang on, I've actually got a whole host of roots up here, so surely if I cut there and then have that as my new root line and just remove all that. So if you've got sufficient roots, you feel you've got sufficient roots there and you're not necessarily going to need a lot, then I'd be inclined on this one to cut there. There is another project I'm doing, so I'm going to put this to one side and you're not going to see what I'm going to do with this because that's for an artistic project. And again, when I've got a foot there, I'm looking at these. One of these leaders next spring will tell me which one's doing the best from. You never know, it may be this one. And then come the summertime, I may well chop that entire part off. So again, I think one of the big lessons and rules for beginner bonsai is the soonest you can recognize that you want to get movement and taper, and the sooner you feel confident cutting right back, the better you'll get on with this as a hobby going forward. Anyway, put that to one side. Okay, so it's half an hour later and there's a selection. If you see what I've done, I mean, we are literally cut down to bare. Enough roots there to sustain. That one may go, but that's enough there to go. I've cut that down to potentially either that branch, or that branch will take over. So that may well be a cut in the future. But for now, that is going to be my starting. And this is the approach I do with all of them. So I've got my round container. I want it to be round enough that I can spread the roots out in it so that I can get that spread. I've actually put a really fine mulchy pine bark in the bottom, and also a little bit of the peat that they've come out, or peat or whatever it is that's come out of, is my a nice soil. And as I say, even here I'd have an option if I wanted to put a rock under there, just not to grow root over rock. It's got a flat base, so I put it firmly in there, and then what I do is looking into it I'll actually spread the roots around that. Now obviously these aren't tied down, so they will be vulnerable. They will be vulnerable to wind. So I will also have a usual system of rocks on the top. Now the other thing to be aware of is, not at this stage, but as those roots get stronger, it will actually push the tree up and off that rock, so you may still get a flat base still triangulating. So it is important to keep something on top there. But truthfully, I'm not saying truthfully, it's not like I'm going to lie to you. I'll get some rocks on there, and I will leave that. Temptation to do wiring and that, but remember, your goal is the roots. One, you want it to survive, and two, you want to develop roots on these. This is why you're doing it at this stage. And remember, when we're doing bonsai, if we're starting from starter trees, roots first. Get a nice strong root base. Then you can start concentrating on your primary structure, which is your main trunk and your branches. And that doesn't mean you don't play around with it as you go along, but do things in the right order and you'll get yourself a beautiful tree. So in this first part, after you've selected your tree, it's all about getting your roots spread. Yeah, so that way we're setting this tree up for the best possible future, and we'll just be patient. And I'm going to do that with the rest of these. There won't be any difference, and what I do also is, after I've put those, I'll just put a layer of pine bark over the top. And as much as that is actually, I find that with these colder months, if we get a snow or a frost, then it's another layer of insulation is what I find. One more to go. This is an odd one. Oh, that's right, I didn't want to put that in that. Looking at that one, we've got this odd root structure. Chances are, I'm hoping I'll get something more from here, but I've got an idea with splitting that. I had an idea with splitting it, but then I split it, so we won't do that anymore. Go back to the first idea. So it's just a reminder, you still have to be careful when you're working with these. Okay, so there's those. I've got another 10 there. The others I won't show you now because there's a little project I've got in mind. I don't know if it's going to work. So we'll zoom those in a minute. Anyway. So from Xavier down the bottom of the garden, having now potted up all his Hawthorne and his Larch, and hopefully next year we're going to see some good signs of root growth. Well, we won't see the root growth, but we'll see some growth from the buds, and it's the start. And as I said to you in my last video, that's the whole idea of today. Start. Get yourself some saplings, 2-year-old saplings, and get them potted up. There's no time like today. It's not frosty. You can get on and do it. Anyway, I'm burbling. From Xavier down the bottom of the garden, with the sun shining in December, looking forward to Christmas. I say cheers, happy bonsaiing, God bless.